Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. You remember a few days ago, there was a missile attack on the city of Sumy in Sumy Oblast, Ukraine. The Russians launched 2 Iskander ballistic missiles on the city, and the Russians claimed they destroyed about 60 Ukrainian and NATO officers. The Ukrainians say the Russians just attacked civilians. I made a video yesterday with the Russians' statement regarding the attack. They said we attacked the Ukrainian military who had a gathering inside Sumy, the city of Sumy. I will show you where that is located on the map. The Ukrainians and the Western media portrayed that as a solely civilian attack. I saw pictures and yeah, there were civilian casualties in the streets. Now, I don't know if that's Sumy or not. I don't know if those, but anyway, this is what the pictures revealed. Some pictures. We have here a few articles, including the Ukrainians, who are actually confirming partly that indeed there were some Ukrainian military commanders hurt in that attack. I suspect, like in many other occasions, that the truth will come out later, and again, probably the Russians are partly correct. There was an attack on a commander, Ukraine and NATO commanders gathering inside the Sumy, city of Sumy. Hold on. And probably there were some other attacks as well that caused civilian casualties. Now, let's start with the first article coming from Russia Today, where the Russians claim, this is from yesterday, the 14th of April, Russian strike on Sumy targeted Ukrainian and NATO officials, according to Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of the Russian Federation. Now, you can say, you can claim whatever you want. That is true. But wait. And he claimed that at least 60 senior military personnel were killed during the missile attack, according to Moscow. That's what it is. That's what they say. And let's see what this guy clearly says. There are NATO servicemen there, and they are directly in charge. He said, everybody knows it. We had facts about who was at the facility that was hit in Sumy. It was another meeting of Ukrainian military leaders with their Western colleagues, who were either masquerading as mercenaries or I don't know who. All right, you say, well, it's very vague, but hey, it comes with this. Civilian casualties in Sumy strike were caused by Ukrainian military's callousness. Again, this is what probably Lavrov says. The use of civilian areas for any military purpose during a war is forbidden because it exposes civilians to be involuntary casualties in case of attack. Rafone elaborates. So this Rafone is a guy, let's see, a strategic analyst and director of the CP Foundation in Brussels. So he claims that if the Ukrainians are using civilian areas for military purposes, that actually is forbidden. It is or not, I let the experts clarify that. The problem is, I said many times before, you don't fight inside the cities. They will get you and the civilians. So I think you're partly guilty for exposing the civilians to possible attacks. When I said yesterday, well, where did you want these guys to meet? In the field so they can be bam? Well, I don't know, but you can find ways. These are you can see how the Russians, in their search, criminal search you may say, of the Ukrainian military, were gonna strike these guys. That's the point. Next one. Let me show you what Lavrov says about the strike. Russia has evidence Sumy strike targeted Ukrainian troops and foreign mercenaries. Now, I would like to see the evidence, correct? I think you would like to see that too. So again, On Sunday, Russian forces carried out a missile strike on the Ukrainian city of Sumy, targeting a site of a meeting of the Seversk Tactical and Operational Commanders leadership. Now, remember this, Seversk Tactical and Operational Commanders leadership. Earlier on Monday, the Russian Defense Ministry said that the strike killed over 60 Ukrainian service people. All right. International humanitarian law categorically prohibits the placement of military facilities and weapons around civilian objects. I don't know if these guys were military facilities or weapons, they were commanders. Well, can you consider that? What exactly? Targets? Since the first day of the Ukraine crisis, and earlier and even during the Minsk agreements, there have been 1 million cases of artillery and air defense systems being placed in city blocks near kindergartens. Well, that's what they claim. How many videos are posted online of Ukrainian women shouting for the military to get away from stores and playgrounds? But this practice continues. That's accurate. We have facts about who was at the facility that was hit in Sumy. There was another gathering, quote-unquote, of Ukrainian military commanders with their Western colleagues who were disguised either as mercenaries or I don't know who, he said. The New York Times recently reported the Americans have been playing a leading role in strikes on Russia. Without this part, the majority of Ukrainian long-range missiles would have not taken off at their deployment sites, he said. Now, he said he's got evidence. And here is how the Ukrainians report it. Why? I have at the end, I always go chronologically. That's how you go to an apex, and then you go back. So I have at the end of this video, or the apex, the Ukrainians themselves telling us that a commander was killed in Sumy during the missile attack. That confirms partly that the Russians targeted some military commanders. All right, let's read further. So, Ukrainska Pravda. This is from yesterday. Russian Defense Ministry cynically claims 13 April strike on Sumy targeted military meeting. Okay, cynically. And here, you see this, I don't know what's going on here, but not good for some people. It says, following a ballistic missile strike on the city center of Sumy on 13 April, which killed dozens of civilians, Russian Defense Ministry cynically claimed that the attack has targeted some so-called military meeting and that civilians had been used a human shields. Now, this is what they claim. Now, I disagree, and I think you disagree as well, but I don't know what you think, that if you want to target a suspect, you don't blow up a city. So, let's say, if you want to destroy a little military target in, let's say, Hiroshima or Nagasaki, you don't drop an atomic bomb and destroy everything. Correct? That's a war crime, isn't it? Or it's a poor justification for dropping that destruction on that target. But I think the same is valid for Gaza. So if we are very much enraged by this, killing civilians, as well targeting the commanders, and you say, well, that's casualties, then you should be very much enraged on what's going on in Gaza. Or at least the media and the politicians who seem to be objective and very much compassionate about Sumy, which I am. Civilians, we're going to point out who the perpetrators were. Then you should be very concerned, and they're not, about what's going on in Gaza, which I think is not 60 civilians in one strike. Go and look at the pictures, okay? That's, I think, tens of thousands of casualties over there. And they say, well, remember the pager? They used the placed bombs inside the pagers and the walkie-talkies. Remember that one? And then there were some civilian casualties. And these guys over there, they gave a golden pager to Trump, Bibi Netanyahu, claiming the great victory due to, I don't know, what's his name? Yahweh. So, and it was great for them, but a lot of civilians died who were in the proximity of the pagers. I want to hear condemnation. You will not. Why? Because you know who's behind all this. Partly. So let's move on. This is from the New Voice of Ukraine. This is from today. Russia's missile terror is a strategy to break Ukraine's will, force Putin's peace terms. It's a war. This is not the first time when this happened. But let me show you now the cherry on the cake. Ukrainska Pravda. Commander of the 27th Rocket Artillery Brigade killed in a Russian missile attack on Sumy. All right, said that before I go here, let me show you where this Sumy is. Wait, close this. Right here. So this is Ukraine. Sumy is in this area across from Kursk. So, Sumy is a city about 20 kilometers from the border. This is Sumy. This is the border with Russia. This is Kursk. This is the last pocket of the NATO invasion of Russia, using the Ukrainians, unfortunately. And this is Kursk, right there. This is Kursk city center bombed, right? I'm sorry, Kursk, Jesus Christ. Sumy, my God. All right, so let's go to the last article. So this is the guy who, according to the Ukrainians, this is Ukrainska Pravda. Colonel, that's a commander, he's not a baboonstein. Commander of the 27th Rocket Artillery Brigade, named after Ataman Pedro Kalniszewski, that sounds very Polish to me, was killed in a Russian missile attack on the city on Sumy on 13th of April. Hoppa, what's this? Oh, cynically, claims Pop. So who's right again, at least? So he was definitely killed, according to the Ukrainians, in the 13th of April attack on Sumy, Russian missile, Iskander, remember? And the source is, so you don't think I'm just a baboon, Berdichev City Council, a Ukrainian public broadcaster with reference to the district military administration, Ukrainska Pravda, sources in the defense forces. So it's not like Sputnik did it, or Russia Today, or Pravda. Quote from Berdichev City Council. Ukrainians continue to struggle that will determine the further of state of civilized society. Okay, that's one thing. And we have here, the Berdichev Hromada has received the painful news of the death of a Ukrainian defender. Professional defender of what? Of city of Sumy? As far as I remember, that's not at war. The Russians attack it. Professional military colonel Ukr Yula as the result of a missile attack by the enemy. Right? According to Berdichev District Military Administration, Yula sustained fatal injuries as a result of a missile attack on the city of Sumy on 13th of April. Do you want any more proof that this guy is telling the truth? I rest my case. Now you can say it's only one example, but it matches the narrative that the Russians just attacked Sumy city center just to kill civilians for, remember what they said here? Only for this reason. Remember New Voice of Ukraine? Russia's missile terror is strategy to break Ukraine's will. That's a terror, but on the other hand, they come and say, wait a second, we got this guy killed. I will tell you a personal thing here. Since I've been covering Ukraine garbage war, and I'm not going to go into what credentials I have and what I know and how I know, but I will tell you my conclusion in the propaganda coming from the Ukrainians and from the Russians. This is the direct experience. They all lie. More or less, the Ukrainians, according to my estimates, my assessment as a human being, reading their articles from at least three mainstream, the biggest, sometimes four media outlets, which are Ukrainska Pravda, New Voice of Ukraine, Ukrinform, and sometimes Kiev Independent. I read them at least twice a day, every day. And I also read at least three Russian sources, which is Sputnik, Russia Today, and sometimes TASS or Pravda. But, usually Russia Today and Sputnik. I can tell you that my experience as a human being is this. The Ukrainians exaggerate, that's a euphemism from lying, much more than the Russians. The Russians were more, I don't want to say honest, on point. When they said, remember when they attacked, what was that in Zaporozhye? Was Krivny Rog, Krivny something, Krivny Rih? They attacked another gathering. It was the same thing. And the Russians said, no, that's what. And then when they attacked, remember that little restaurant? I can't remember where that restaurant was located, I don't know, about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Again, they showed us the marketplace, the restaurant. And again, the Russian says, no, it was a commander's. And then each and every time, little by little, the Ukrainians' narrative went down and the Russian narrative increased. Why? They were more consistent. They admitted after a while, or shush, they didn't even come to say it. Personal experience, you can go and verify all these three attacks. All these three attacks. Kryvyi Rih, I think, or Kryvyi Rog, it's in Dnipropetrovsk, I think, or Zaporozhye. Let me just see. I mean, I don't want to be so baboonish here. I mean, I am, but you know what I mean? Not like really that. And I'm going to show you, because I remember clearly when that happened. And let me go there. Right there. So it was right here. This is Kryvyi Rih. I was right. Right here. And the Russians struck. Right here it was the gathering, not inside this little thing. It was a little bit north of it, around here somewhere. I can't remember exactly the town. Now it's up to you to look for it, okay, my friends? And then you remember the other one with the marketplace, with, the people, a restaurant in the marketplace. There's three examples I clearly have, and not only. I don't have on the other side, though, the same thing. Here is, my friends, I think the Russians, and little by little, they will come and say more. This is one example. I don't think it was a coincidence, and these guys will, for Ukrainska Pravda, coming, because this article right here from Ukrainska Pravda is from the 14th. This is on the same page as this right here. This is from the 15th. So if I go probably, I don't know, let me see. If I go on Ukrainska Pravda main page, and I look for these guys, I think that's what earlier. Let me put my glasses. I find this in the same breath. I don't know if they changed because these guys are updated. I'm sorry, but right here, Russian missile pop, and somewhere here was the Ukrainian commander, but I don't find it now. Oh, I'm sorry. What am I doing? No, it was with this one. With this one right here. This one from Ukrainska Pravda was with this one, with the artillery, and this is New Voice of Ukraine. All right, my friends, this is what I found, and you do your own research. I think the Russians partly, so far, tell the truth. The other ones lie. Lie. Lie why? They said it was civilians, just cynical attack. Was it really like that? Remember, civilians died. That's bad. That's bad. Think about Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Forces and Gaza. Every time you hear the Western media and politicians outraged for good reasons about Ukraine, I want you to immediately go swiftly to Gaza. And when you go over there, so these guys are outraged for this, but then in Gaza is that, and they don't get outraged. Now, what does that tell you? Those guys are criminals. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.